Welcome, everyone. I do like that music. It gets me juiced up a little bit. But today we are going to be talking about sports betting, sports, latest trends in sports with a good friend. Haven't done a show with him in quite a while. Matt McEwen, better known as Dead President Picks. And believe me, his picks do work. There's a lot of VIPs out there that think they're VIP, but you're looking at one of the godfathers of the VIP service, and his knowledge is second to none in that realm for sure. And of course, I'm joined by Rudy Reyes, iHeart Radio, the voice of Southern California news. How's it going today, Rudy?
Hey, it's going great. 62 and popping. I'll be multitasking today on iHeart Radio. I have 3 stations that I'm toggling back and forth with, so I am going to have fun today.
It sounds it. What's new with you, Matt? Thanks for joining the show. This is great.
Of course, yeah. Appreciate you guys having me on. This now kind of turning the page to college basketball, NBA. You know, as we had this great football season that's over, but March Madness will be here before we know it. So trying to soak in this last month here, specifically in college basketball, before we get to the tournament and all the mayhem unravels.
Yeah, and it's right around the corner, isn't it? We have the golf is starting to heat up too, and we all know I do the PGA stuff and DFS. I throw out a pool of 24 golfers from the models, and it's up to you to take advantage of them, do your lineups with them. Some of the guys have hit really big, which I'm proud of, but I have never hit it really big with them. I just cash a little here, a little there, but it adds up. Yeah. But every once in a while, someone has hit it pretty darn big with those things. So those will be coming out later today. Let's start out with the NBA right away. And one of the biggest questions in our neck of the woods, Matt, is a guy named Joel Embiid in the Philadelphia 76ers, which is the pride of Philadelphia now that the NFL season is over. And my question is very simple. Did they do enough to get them away from having to play in the play-in tournament? And if Embiid comes back with any type of health condition and he's in shape, do they still have a chance to win the Eastern Conference? We'll start with me.
Yeah, I'd say the East is pretty open, John, in my opinion, really outside of Boston. I think it's Boston, and then there's a fall off, right? I think Milwaukee, from a talent standpoint, is the next best, but we know their defensive struggles that they've had this season. So when fully healthy, I think Philadelphia is the third best team in the conference. The issue is, to your point, can they survive, right, until Embiid comes back in the lineup? I don't know really what more they could have done at the deadline. Not a ton of big names were really moved. They obviously added Buddy Hield, which is a big boost offensively. He does fit in well there, really good three-point shooter. So I think the addition of Hield was pretty good. The campaign Pat Bev trade, a lot of opinions on it. I personally liked it because I think it adds a little bit of offense off the Philadelphia bench, which they were lacking. And then they just bought out Kyle Lowry and bring him in. Now, what is he going to be at this stage in his career? That's more of a question mark. We know he's not the player he once was. But again, nonetheless, it's going to be some help off that Philadelphia bench. So if you look right now, they are 3.5 games ahead of Miami for staying out of that play-in spot. And then overall, just to stay totally in the playoffs and not fall out of the play-in, they hold about an 11-game cushion. So it would be a catastrophic collapse it would take for them to fall completely out of the field. But I think it is key for them to stay in that top 6 and avoid the play-in game. If they can do that, yes, I think they still have a chance. But, a lot of this is going to fall on the shoulders of Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris, 2 guys that are specifically Harris, right? He's a max player, and he's a max player for a reason. That they paid him a lot of money. And Maxey's had an all-star caliber season. Their schedule gets tough, though, guys. If you look at it the next month, they have a lot of really tough games in there. A little bit of luck tonight that they're playing Miami on a back-to-back. Jimmy Butler still is out. So they actually are favored in this game tonight by 3 points. A lot of games moving forward, though, they're going to be a heavy underdog in. It's kind of just damage control until then. If they stay in that play-in spot, I still think they can. If they went into the play-in, technically, if Embiid's back, I still do think they have a chance, right? We saw with teams in the past, they've been able to piece together some runs from the play-in. But, yeah, a lot of concern until Embiid's back here in Philly.
Yeah, no doubt. Rudy, do you think Nick Nurse is a much better coach than what Doc Rivers did in Philadelphia? Because that win over Cleveland as a, what was it, Matt, 11.5-point dog?
11.5, yep.
And they pretty much dominated them. And I was pleasantly surprised and actually shocked that wasn't a 20-point blowout. And that's without Tobias Harris in the lineup, I believe. And, it looks like Nick Nurse is just a genius right now to get that win and keep this team afloat, because they could easily tank and go down the toilet and not even make the playoffs, I suppose. But Rudy, what do you think of the Sixers' chances here to, meet the Celtics in the conference final, for example, and beat them?
Well, the way the Celtics look right now, they are probably the number one team in the East, at least right now. Of course, it's going to toggle back and forth as we kind of segue into what the All-Star break is going to look like, right? A lot of glitz and glamour in the city of Indianapolis, and, the fans have been deserving of that. But overall, when you look at Daryl Morey, he had made some inquiries into different teams. He inquired with the Lakers about LeBron James. He inquired with the Phoenix Suns about the big three between Durant, Booker, and obviously Bradley Beal, who went out last night with a hamstring against the Sacramento Kings, who are kind of balancing the 6th and 7th seed respectfully. I don't know that he didn't do enough. I think that he did some things that were able to help sustain the current goal, which is to be at 500, above 500, being the top third seed within the Eastern Conference, which I completely agree with Matt here in that Daryl Morey basically did his due diligence. He did everything he needed to. I'm not going to necessarily buy in to the whole Buddy Hield conversation. Look, sometimes it's a new place, a new face, and they play better, and that's predominantly what you see from certain guys. But Bradley Beal didn't exactly light it up with the team that he came from. I mean, he's not the player that everybody thought he was going to be as he developed into the NBA and learning the NBA speed. I don't know that they did enough necessarily, but I do like the Patrick Bev move. I completely agree with you, Matt, on that one. I think they really needed a move from Patrick Beverley. I know that he was a very good player at one point, certainly has gone downhill just a little bit. And it seems like everywhere that he's just been clearly and never going to, and clearly drafted in that respectful manner where he's not going to be the leader of the bunch. He's going to be a follower. And he's going to be just one of those support guys, just like what J.R. Reed meant to the Cleveland Cavaliers not that long ago. Ended up throwing the ball out from the Lakers and LeBron James just saying, "What are you doing?" So clearly maybe a little too much green on the offset for J.R. Reed. But I think Daryl Morey did enough, but whether or not they can sustain to keep that third position, maybe the fourth position within the Eastern Conference in totality, is something that I'm really looking forward to from the 76ers. Now, Beal, who's out for the Phoenix Suns, is going to hamper them big time, but they managed to stave off the Sacramento Kings at all that it's worth headed into All-Star. LeBron James reported also not to be playing in the final game against Utah in the Western Conference. So a lot of good stuff from the 76ers. I think it'll keep them afloat for a while Embiid finds a way to get back to it. But this is not a 4 to 6 week. I mean, this guy's been boggled with meniscus tears and injuries throughout his career, and he's been able to play through some of that. The problem is that eventually that wears on you to a point where now he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. So we'll see what it looks like at the All-Star break and obviously forthcoming post-All-Star break to see if he can find his way back.
Good stuff, Rudy and Matt. And tailing on Dan Kelly's good comment with the Cleveland Cavaliers, I pulled up the odds here, plus 875 to win the Eastern Conference. And I have to admit, first and foremost, this is what's great about these shows, because I wouldn't have thought about this if somebody in the chat wouldn't have brought it to my attention. And, I do think about it like weeks ago that, oh, wow, Cleveland's playing good. But, the Knicks are, I think, one step ahead, in my personal opinion. No offense to Dan. Plus 650 right now, yet the Celtics and the Bucks, who hired Doc Rivers, and I guess I'm not trying to say anything negative about Doc Rivers, guys, but he didn't do so good in Philly. What makes him going to do so good in Milwaukee? That's a topic for another show. In fact, that is a show all by itself. But the Knicks at plus 650, just in a few minute or so, do you think which one is the better value, Cleveland or the Knicks? We'll start with Matt.
I would agree with you there, John. I like the Knicks more, in my opinion. I love what the Knicks have done, kind of rebuilding, reconstructing that roster. Because, if you look at a year or two ago, they were in a tough place. Remember when Jalen Brunson ink that max contract, there was a lot of critics to it, right? They kind of were like, okay, this is a guy who had one good year along with Luka in Dallas, and it seemed like an overpay at the time. And I mean, it could not have worked out better. He's a unselfish superstar that they have. I mean, I think he's one of the most underrated players in basketball, and they've done a really good job kind of building around him, adding a guy like OG Anunoby there at the deadline. They've added Josh Hart along the way here with that roster. So I think the way New York's constructed, they're just like a gritty team, right? I think the Knicks can go out. I always say as a Sixers fan, I don't want to see them in a series because they have a lot of guys. They have a lot of different guys on that team that could hurt you. I think Cleveland's a little more top heavy where they really rely on Garland and Mitchell. And if one of those guys is off, as we've seen in series before, they don't have the same firepower. I just don't think they're as deep of a team. So I would agree there, John. I think that the Knicks are worth a bet. And then kind of to my point earlier, and I think Rudy was saying this too, like it's the Celtics, and then I think there's the fall off, right? So I think anyone can be had in that conference with the exception of Boston. But as we saw last year, an 8 seed in Miami went on in and beat Boston, right? So it's not like the Celtics have really shown us in the past that they are this unbeatable team come playoffs. From a talent perspective, we know they're the best, but things happen along the way. I think one of those.
We seem to have lost Matt. We're going to let Matt come back in, but I'm going to pick up where he left off there, because when you look at the Knicks as a total group, I really believe in. To your point, Matt, I think that the Knicks are more on an up and down type of kiltered schedule, meaning that they lost against the Rockets just the other day, 105-103. They face off against the Magic tonight. Orlando's been kind of a rollover at certain points. They didn't do a ton in free agency. But you're right. The Celtics really haven't shown anybody anything, at least at this point, that they can sustain any type of playoff run. Sadly enough, Jason Tatum, by his own admission, saying, look, I'm going to take this one game at a time, one play at a time, one opportunity at a time. And as long as the Celtics can keep the guys healthy, again, this is a sprint, not a race. And the NBA is a very long season, just like Major League Baseball is a long season. If they can keep guys healthy and keep the rotation fresh, I think the Celtics have a chance to prove other people wrong that have otherwise said, you know what, these guys are soft, they're not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think they're dangerous. I do. I think Embiid, if he comes back in any kind of physical condition to play playoff basketball, and all this rest that he's getting, it could be pretty nasty between the Sixers and the Celtics down the stretch. But you definitely, I think of the long shots right now, the Sixers are the best long shot that is at 15-1 or higher to win the Eastern Conference. And you can't rule out Nick Nurse. He's been there. You know, the guy's a very, very good coach. But anyway, on the next topic here, Embiid is also, this is the Embiid show. He's disqualified from winning any postseason awards like MVP. And I'm not just singling him out, but this rule to me personally seems to be a bit idiotic, that, you know, if the guy only plays 50 games and a guy like, the Joker plays 70 games, in your voting, you're going to automatically in your head consider that, right? So why do we have to have this stupid 65-game rule? Because that could have contributed to Embiid getting hurt in the first place. What do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of hit the nail on the head there, John, with did he rush back, right, and try to play through that for the MVP? I have mixed feelings on it. I like the rule at times, and then I think the downside is kind of what you hit on. What if guys are forcing themselves, to play when they don't need to? I think today's NBA does have a little bit too much of the, load management, specifically on the back-to-backs that we see. So I think the intent of the rule is to clean that up, trying to get people who are spending their money to go see LeBron play on a back-to-back, not have him pull out of the game 30 minutes before, and then the whole team sits. So, I mean, I get that side of it, but listen, we've seen teams do it. I think the Spurs really were the first team to do this, where they kind of started doing the whole load management thing, and it does help a lot in the playoffs. So, like, from a Philadelphia fan, obviously with Joel Embiid, we know toward the back end of the season he's kind of worn down. That's why I think if he can come back fully healthy, this injury isn't the worst thing, because then he can almost be fresh here for a playoff run. So, I mean, I think from a fan perspective, it has ups, it has downs, but I don't love the rule for, that reason. But at the same time, I do like it because I get annoyed as a fan sometimes when guys just sit back-to-backs, right? Like, why are you sitting back-to-backs, especially when they're, if it's LeBron James, I was using him as an example, but that's probably not the best example. He's obviously much older, but you guys get my point. Like, if you're a 25-year-old basketball player, you should be able to go in and play a back-to-back. But I think the intent of the rule is to clean that up. I agree, though. I see your side too, John, but I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it nonetheless, but maybe it'll play into the benefit of the Sixers this year if Embiid does get that rest, right? And then he can come back fully healthy.
Well, and that's where load management really comes into play, right? Because you see guys coming back from injury, you want to give them that kind of a lot of time to sit back, really collect themselves, and say, you know what, this is where I am right now. I need to get myself acclimated back to the game. That means I don't mean to pull a Ben Simmons. I mean to pull a Joel Embiid that will enable a guy who's basketball hungry. Ben Simmons is always off in La La Land, but when you consider what Embiid has meant to the 76ers up to this point, but still as a team collectively not been able to get past that hump, load management is a way, and I'm going to agree with you to an extent, meaning that for the older players, your veteran players, your Joel Embiid's, your LeBron James, your Kevin Durant's, these guys that have put in hours and hours and thousands of minutes on the floor in hard-fought games in NBA finals, you want to give them that load management and assign that to them specifically. But you also play on the other side of the caution. So you know what? This guy's been doing this for about 8 weeks now. I think it's time to work him back in the lineup a lot sooner rather than later. And I'm not recommending teams to wait for 6 to 8 weeks to get a guy back in from a load management perspective, but to yearn them back into the lineup, even if you believe that they're ready. If they're not ready, players know when they're not ready. I mean, Ben Simmons consistently states that he's not ready, or I have a back problem, or I have this problem. You don't want to overextend someone. Ben Simmons is just a weak-minded player, and he has no business in the NBA, in my opinion only. But when you look at the money he's being paid versus the money that Joel Embiid is being paid, you're talking apples and oranges. So load management is there for the good, not for the bad. 65 games, on the other hand, and you don't reach an MVP conversation, or at least some type of dialogue referring to 65 games, that's a little wishy-washy. I think that's more like a ticky-tack foul, to be honest with you. That's the equivalent. The problem is that the NBA PA Players Association, along with the agreements of other players, put this rule in place to do a couple of things. First, enable them to recognize that 65 games is like a threshold. I mean, you're not in Major League Baseball, you're not going to be an MVP or an all-star if you sit out key games in key matches, especially rubber matches, right? So I think the same thing applies to the NBA and the players therein. And if you don't play, you can't win.
I can't agree more. I think of more of the families that have to invest basically $1,000 to take their family of 2 or 3 kids to a game. It's insane. And then for these players to be able to opt out, granted, if it's an injury concern, okay, I have no problem with that. But just to say load management, I'm not playing tonight, when the kids want to see LeBron James play, they want to see whoever play, and they invest that kind of money, the least they can do is show up on the dance floor. What if the celloist of the Philadelphia Philharmonic or the London Philharmonic that decides, hey, wait a minute, guys, I know you paid all this money for the concert, but I can't play tonight because I have my fingernail hurts. See, that would irritate me. But I also thought, like, where can you get a job like Ben Simmons has? And I immediately thought of Roger Goodell. I did. I have to say it. Let's move on to the next topic. So, there are similar salaries too, come to think of it. We were talking about load management here. So second of back-to-back games, this is kind of important stuff. And this is where we're going to get into some of the betting trends that I follow. I have, as Matt and Rudy knows, I have over 5,000 algorithms that, do a pretty good job. Humbly said, we've been rolling here pretty well the last couple of years, especially in college hoops this year. And we'll talk about college hoops next. And I will, after this segment, I will present one of the betting algorithms that's active tonight in the NBA. So hang on to your seats here for just a little bit longer. Double-digit dogs playing their 3rd or more consecutive road game. it's a fade. It's a fade against the Pistons. They're playing the Suns tonight. Now, these are just situational trends. These are not betting recommendations. The goal here is to provide you with some information that you can do what you want with it. You can say, you know what, John, that I don't agree with that. I'm going to play the Pistons tonight. And that's cool. This is just information to, create some thought processes and a little bit of discussion. Home team playing their second consecutive home game, favored between 3.5 and 9.5 points. Look at the over, 31-21, 60%. That's to play over in the Magic and the Knicks game tonight. And these are the ones I really like. These have really stood the test of time. Both teams with zero rest. The favorites have gone 79-21, 60-37 for 62%. That's a bet on both the Suns and the Celtics tonight. And home favorites with both teams on zero rest. Again, Celtics and Suns. But look at the record, 40-20. One push, 67% winning bets. That is spanning the last 5 seasons. So of those plays, are there any that stick out for you, Matt, that you really like or don't like?
Well, that trend, I mean, great work too with the, with the work you're doing there, putting that stuff together. I was looking at the Suns there. So the trend, and you can correct me if I was wrong there, you were saying this favorite, right? With when both teams have no rest. That's correct, right? With that,
right, that is correct. Yep.
Yeah, and I like the Suns to begin with there, and the spread right now I believe is at 12 most places. It actually did open 13.5, so it's come down a little bit. Bradley Beal obviously injured last night in that game against the Kings. Obviously, that might move the line maybe a point or two. But yeah, I think the Suns are in a good position tonight to kind of just blow out a Pistons team that all year has been a fade. I mean, they're 8-45. It's been a miserable season. These two teams did play earlier in the year in Detroit. Phoenix won that game by 14. So I expect a similar game tonight. It might be a little bit closer early, but I mean, at some point they're going to impose their will, right? I mean, they're just a way better team. So I think they're in a good spot tonight. And then you see Boston, a very similar spread there, 13.5. So big spreads, but sometimes, as we know, those big spreads can scare people away, but they're usually big for a reason. So I think Boston and Phoenix are both in a really good spot tonight. I also do like my Sixers tonight there at home against Miami. And I'm curious there, Miami is on a back-to-back tonight, right? Yeah, they are on the road back-to-back. They just played the Bucks last night. So I just think, like I was saying earlier, situationally it's a tough spot for them because unfortunately Jimmy Butler had a death in the family, right? So that's kept him out for a few games. He's not playing tonight. And then to the point they're on back-to-back. And Philly's as healthy as they can be for the current state that they're in, right? Without Joel Embiid, it looks like Maxey and Harris will play tonight, which goes a long way leading into this one. So we'll see how that one plays out. But yeah, love a lot of those trends there, John.
Yeah, and Rudy, you have any thoughts about the load management trends there? I know that you're more of a money line type of guy, meaning you don't play the spread too often, but you're good at predicting outcomes. Any thoughts on it? Oh, you're muted.
It was self-muted because I wanted to say something so badly. I said, you know what? I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait. I'm going to
never mute you.
No, there's so many. Yeah, really. There was a lot of things to like about the 76ers, and I don't like the fact that Jimmy Butler is out for the Miami Heat. And I think that, and to your point, Matt, when you look at the game, it's going to be kind of oddly paired. But again, Buddy Hield's getting acclimated to it. He should be ready to go. There were some teams that did some pretty decent things as far as grabbing Dinwiddie for the Lakers, and the deal is that they go to and they win the finals. He gets $1 million and things of that nature. So, I mean, you have other teams that have acquired players to make those types of incentives. And so now you have teams, and those teams are the ones that are going to create that kind of spread based on what you're looking at, based on the roster, based on winning percentages. You really have to, for those that do not bet, and I'm not one of them, you have to really dissect to get this type of data that John's produced time and time again on every single show, to get down to the minutia and find out why you should bet, who you should bet for, the overs, the unders, maybe a little pizza money on the side. But I think it's really important to understand that if you're going to bet the money that you can lose. Don't worry about anything else. If you can afford to lose it, bet it. If you can't, don't. And that's my theory. I don't wake up thinking, you know what? I gambled enough to close my eyes last night. I think I'm good for the next day. And here I am.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rudy. I mean, there's nothing worse than, especially the new bettors that are out there with all the states being legalized. If you ever wake up and you think, "Oh man, I got to win tonight," or I have to double up," or if you start thinking those things, then
Or I got to
do
sell my
what you can
Maserati.
do. Break your phone so you can't make the bet on the app, or give it to your wife or girlfriend. Do something. Throw it in the river, because that's where you really get yourself in trouble, when you fear that you have to like go for it to make up for the mistake you made the last week. So try not to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So
What I
trends
do like
trending.
in this Sixers game is the bets here. I have the feeds from DraftKings. 58% of the bets, the tickets, are on the Heat. Okay, but only 42% of the handle is on it. So the money is clearly coming on the Sixers at a smaller rate, which means one thing, guys, and you guys know it better than most, is that that's the bigger better. That's the so-called smart money. I don't really, segregate between the pros and the Joes, as we used to call it, or still do, because of my Wall Street days, and then still today, sentiment is very, very important, and it's the same type of equations I use here in the sports betting market, because Vegas is never trying to trick you. They're never trying to set a trap to steal money from you. What they are doing is setting a line that they feel they'll have equal buyers and sellers. And it's as simple as that. They could care less who wins the game, whether Rudy wins his first bet ever or whether Matt has just won his 20th in a row. They don't care. They just don't care. They just want even action. And I can't emphasize that enough. But I think the total here is even more glaring in terms of the public bettor, or the majority. 25% of the handle is on the over. 60% of the tickets is on the over. 75% of the handle is on the under, but that only accounts for 40% of the tickets. Mm-hmm. So that too is pretty, it's just one tool, guys and gals, that we use. And it guides you sometimes to a play, and other times you go down the rabbit hole and you have to bounce your way back out. Mm-hmm. Now, it's time for that betting algorithm I was mentioning, and I think this is the slide. No, these are situational. That's the next one. We're going to get to that in just a second. Here's the algorithm for the day, and this is a premium bet to my clients for what it's worth. It's just one bet. You don't hit 60% winners of the season by winning them all. You get what I'm saying? Check out this stat. This is a stat that I want everybody to listen to and write down. Which is harder to do? Win 58% over 1,000 picks, or win 10 in a row against the spread? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It is a billion, I emphasize billion times harder to win 58% over 1,000 picks than it is to win 10 in a row. And honestly, anybody can win 10 in a row against the spread. And I mean anybody. You could be brand new bettor and you start out hot and you think, oh my God, this is easy. Well, we're here to tell you that it's not. And it's a grind, and you have to take the wins with the losses and just keep moving forward. With that said, we're going to bet on road teams. The road team is favored between 5.5 and 10.5 points. The road team has exceeded their season-to-date scoring average by at least 5 points in each of their last 3 games. So their offense is picking up recently in the last 3 games. 81% straight up, 62% against the spread since 2004. And if the road team has a losing record on the season, which the Atlanta Hawks do, 18-4 straight up, 82%, 14-8 against the number, 64%. So this is clearly putting us on the Atlanta Hawks minus 7.5 points when they take on those lowly Charlotte Hornets tonight down in Charlotte, North Carolina. And my live in-game betting strategy, I love doing this, guys, because it brings me back to Wall Street, trading in the pit, when we used to yell and scream and do signs like this. If this market gets down to anywhere close to under 3 points in game, you got to use that to your advantage. Scoring volatility is very, very high. There's a lot of games where both the opponent and the foe will have 10-point leads or more. So when that happens, you have to be contrarian. You have to, sell into strength, buy into weakness. and it should work out for you. So in this case, I have told clients that you bet 80% of that 8-unit amount, because this grades as an 8-unit play on a scale of 5 to 10. And then take that 20% and try to get it as close to 3.5 or even pick them as you can. And I only do it during the first half because you don't have enough time to be right if you do it later in the game, the third and fourth quarters. So that is my little segment there. Now we're going to move on to college hoops. And college hoops is definitely heating up, as we said earlier in the show. Let's start out with who you think potentially are the Cinderellas here, and I call it the bubble burst type Cinderellas that are going to upset somebody here in the next couple of weeks and maybe take down a big giant like Texas Tech did to Kansas. I mean, could you believe that game? 50 points by Kansas. I mean, did they play with 3 guys? I didn't see the game on TV, but holy moly, 50 points. But to Kansas's credit, they've been a dog 3 times, 3 under Bill Self. And they've won the game outright all 3 times. Just amazing stuff in college hoops. But let's start with any Cinderella type teams that you have on your radar, Matt, and then we'll go to Rudy.
Yeah, I actually just read an article yesterday, kind of with like a short, I don't want to call anyone a favorite, right? Because the best odds are Connecticut and Purdue at plus 650, and then, medium-sized team and then the long shot. So my big long shot this year is New Mexico, who last night came out, big win. They played Nevada last night, wire-to-wire game. This New Mexico team is an interesting team because they have a lot of experience on the team, but they also play really hard defensively. And a lot of people think of New Mexico as an offensive team, and they are one of the best offensive teams. They rank 11th in the nation in points per game. But if you look at adjusted defense, they're also a top 25 team defensively, which is something a lot of people overlook. They don't think of New Mexico as being a defensive team. Listen, Mountain West is really good this year. I think that they should have 6 bids out of the conference. They will probably end up with a minimum of 4, and then the ceiling will be 6. Nevada might have just played themselves out of it. The problem with the non-power conference is you only get so many quad 1 chances. But this year, with so many teams being good, any time that these 2 teams get together, they do get the quad 1 chance. So a lot of these teams are beating up on each other, kind of knocking themselves in and out of the bubble. Last night should put New Mexico, I think, firmly in for the moment, unless they have a really bad loss. Their biggest knock this year is that they lost twice to UNLV, who's not a very good team. And that is something that I guess technically could hold them back from getting in. But if they get in, guys, they have really good guard play. They have a guy in Dent. They have Jamal Mashburn, who hit multiple big threes last night. They have Jalen House, the son of Eddie House. He's one of the best on-ball guard defenders in the nation. So New Mexico has a lot of upside. I like the job Richard Pitino's done there. They have a couple of good bigs, and they're a team who has some depth. Another team that I would just throw out there, and this, I guess, is less of a long shot here, but I do think has value nonetheless, is Kentucky. Yesterday, they were at 30-1. Now they're down to 25-1 some places. But this is a team, just from a talent perspective, that they could play with anyone. They've one of the best offense in the nation. Their issue has been defensively this year. Can they string together enough stops? The thing that I like with this Kentucky team, though, a lot of the Kentucky teams in the Cal era, even though they've had a lot of good teams, they're typically really young. This team has some veteran presence. They have Antonio Reeves. They have Trey Mitchell on this roster, and then they have really good young freshmen. Rob Dillingham, one of them, Reed Shepard. So this team has a lot of guys that they can go out there and I think compete with anyone in the nation. But those are 2 teams that I would say from a betting standpoint that hold a lot of value.
That's great stuff, man. I agree 100% with what you said there. And for what it's worth, I won't go into any detail, but I think the betting market's right here. Auburn to win the SEC 3-1. I guess the dog, that was an underdog, so I guess he liked it quite a bit. That's
the
cool.
Underdogs, now the overdog.
I was fired up for that one.
Yeah, that's cool, man. It was great timing.
I think you said it for everyone there.
You guys are like Tigers. That could be the thing too. But Auburn is my real. I mean, that's not much of a Cinderella. Let's face it. But for them to win the SEC and then maybe get a 2 seed, maybe possibly a 1 seed if they win the conference, I think they are going to be peaking at the right time. But Rudy, what do you think?
I'll be honest with you. There are some college teams that really kind of blew me away yesterday. In regards to wins and losses, I can't believe Syracuse beat North Carolina. That was a very otherwise well-coached Hubie team that just basically got handled from the tip. I mean, it wasn't a 15-point. It wasn't like a complete blowout. But North Carolina, man, they have to understand that transitions are everything. Ebbs and flows of the games have to be recognized. They do have some great shooters there. They have to understand that fluidity and game pacing in regards, and also turnovers. You have to minimize the amount of turnovers unless you're the recipient of that turnover. Whereas if you're the one committing the turnover, that's certainly not a good thing. And when you trade baskets with a team like Syracuse, they're going to make you pay, and that's exactly what happened the other night. But there are some teams that really aren't being even talked about, and these aren't your Sweet 16 teams. These aren't your Elite 8 teams, or maybe they are. You have teams like the Indiana State Sycamores. They're 22-3. 22-3. There's no team in the NCAA men's basketball tourney, or at least selected as a 22-3. I mean, yeah, fine. They're not the actual likely ones to go to the big dance, but you have to honor what they've done. You have to recognize that they have had nothing but some of the best players there, at least within the Missouri Valley Conference. And no one really wants to talk about it. Of course, they're not the popular vote. Then you look at the Grand Canyon Lopes, they're 22-2, and they're in the WAC. They're in the WAC, and you're not talking about, no one's talking about them. There's no discussion about them. You have Tyon Grant of Bryce Drew's teams is 22-2 and only lost in one conference play game. So again, a team no one's talking about. They're doing very good on the road. They play very good at home. James Madison, they're 22-3 also. They won against Appalachian State and Troy, and they're sitting at a 10-2 conference record within the SB conference. Again, teams that aren't really talking about it. The Dukes have already beaten Michigan State to kick off the season, but then you look at Terrence Edwards, TJ Bickerstaff, who just makes them very dangerous down the stretch because they know how to stretch the floor. And these guys have just been playing lights out. So the last on my list are the Princeton Tigers. 17-3, a little bit early. They're in an Ivy League conference. They're not a talked about most respectable team by any means, at least by other teams. But it's going to be a three-dog race, speaking of dogs, between them, Princeton, Yale, and Cornell. And they're right in the mix. Yale's undefeated at 7-0. So, look, there's still plenty of basketball to be played here. I mean, there's only 2/14 on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to those who have or do not have a significant other. But you know what's going to be the gift that keeps on giving? If any one of these teams get into the big dance, so they're going to have a gift waiting for them in the big dance to take on probably some of the best in Auburn. They're going to take on the Dukes. They're going to take on these guys. Whether or not they get to the big dance, that remains to be seen in the Final Four Elite 8. I've covered the Elite 8. I've covered the Final Four. These teams are hungry. They are like chomping at the bit with every single bounce of that basketball, with every single opportunity to get on the floor, to penetrate. These guys are no joke, and they're going to make a run for it. Believe you me, I had a basketball aficionado on a show, on a podcast, and he was basically saying that, look, man, between TV and podcasting, he's one busy guy, but no busier than the guys who are on the road traveling. You're going to have your Michigans out there. There's just so much basketball to be played. Every single day is going to be like the Final Four for a lot of these guys, a lot of these teams, a lot of these coaches. So we'll see.
Well, one yes or no, Rudy. Do you take a Syracuse at 16-9 if you're on the committee, or do you take the 22-3 team that didn't win the conference? And that's
really tough. That's really tough. I mean, if you're okay, like if this is football, right? Just as an example, you're going to take your well-known, your NCAA Big 25, your top 25 teams. You're going to take your Notre Dames. You're going to take your Syracuse. You're going to take your Dukes. You're going to take your Kentuckys, your North Carolinas. I was watching Mississippi State the other night as well. They look pretty darn good. As you know, in addition, they really played hard.
Not to interrupt you, but let's take Grand Canyon. You know, they're darlings. Everybody loves them, right? They're a team that's expected to be like maybe an 11 or 12 seed at the present time and go deep into the tournament.
Sure.
So at the same time, do you take a Syracuse at 16-9 who now beat North Carolina? Pretty good resume, right? Now, you're going to have to win more. But as we know it right now, take Syracuse or Grand Canyon that failed to win the conference.
Well, no one's won their conferences yet, so I'm not going to put the cart before the horse on that one. If it starts right now, if it started right now and the Elite 8 or the Sweet 16 started right today, I would take Syracuse. But in the stretch of it all, if somehow, some way they're able to win their conference not outright, but let's just say convincingly so, I'll take Grand Canyon over Syracuse, but only if Syracuse does not get more wins within their conference. So,
okay. Yep. So let me show you one little betting algorithm here in college hoops that I think I put on the show. That's the second of back-to-backs. That's the NBA one, and here we are. That's a situational thing. You know what? I don't have that on here, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read it to you because it is a pretty good one. It's not a real mainstream type of stuff here with the Auburn and South Carolina, for example. And by the way, Auburn is the number 13 team in the country. South Carolina, who's on the road in this game, is the 11th best team in the country. So South Carolina theoretically is better than Auburn based on the voters, but Auburn's favored by 11.5 tonight.
Yeah. What
does that tell you? I mean, it's a lot to lay double-digit wood at home in an SEC matchup, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be on Auburn tonight. Looking at this college betting, we're going to bet the over with a price of 140 to 149.5 points. A team in the matchup has lost to the spread by 25 or more points over the previous 3 games. So they're not playing good the last 3 games. In a matchup of teams with winning records, that has gone 70 and 36 to the over, 65%. So we're looking for the opposite of regression with a team named Tulsa, who is the team that has failed to cover the spread, I believe, by over 30 points when they play South Florida tonight in South Florida. So I like the over quite a bit in that game going tonight. So we're getting pretty close to the end of the show. And I guess what we could do is just go around. I just gave my best bet. And we also have the NBA betting algorithm too. That's on the Atlanta Hawks tonight, which is an 8-unit premium play. Matt, why don't we start with you with any bets that you are willing to give out now? Because I don't want you to give away the premium stuff, obviously. But any thoughts on tonight's card you feel pretty good about?
Kind of staying in that game there, John, with Auburn tonight taking on South Carolina. It's just one of those lines that's kind of like I call them screamers, but when the line doesn't add up, it's usually for a reason. And South Carolina is a team that all season I've been a little skeptical of. Yes, they're 21-3 and they're 11th ranked. And listen, they have some big time wins. They went into Tennessee, they won that game, they beat Kentucky earlier in the season. So I'm not going to be someone who says they're overrated because they've kind of responded to every call that they've had as of late. I just think that they're going to regress would be the way that I would use it. So they're 21-3 right now. But if you look at this team, guys, they just don't match up well at all with Auburn. Auburn's a physical team. Really outside of Janai Broome, they have just a bunch of average players. And Auburn goes deep. They play consistently a 10-man rotation, which is a ton for college basketball. They actually usually go 11 deep. But every game this year, 10 guys have played. And then the one game, someone didn't play. So they have continuously rolled out their roster. And, this is a team that has proved that they can play deep. South Carolina, not so much. And specifically in this game, what I want people to watch is the glass in this game. I think Auburn is going to dominate on the boards. Offensive rebounds, I think, are going to be a big advantage in this game. I won't be surprised if Auburn comes out of this game with 10 to 15 offensive boards, and they just kind of beat them out well. South Carolina is not a great rebounding team. They actually only have one guy on their team that averages 5 or more rebounds. That's a problem when you go against Auburn. So, Johnny, we were talking about Auburn a little bit earlier, liking them to kind of make a run in March. This is a team that's more than capable of doing it because, again, they are deep, and they have guys who can hurt you really anywhere on the floor. They only have 2 guys on their team that average double-digit scoring, and that's Janai Broome and Jalen Williams. Outside of that, it's just a bunch of good players. And sometimes those are the toughest teams to beat because you don't know where it's coming from offensively. So I like Auburn a lot tonight. Again, the fact that they are an 11.5 point favorite against a team who's ranked higher, just kind of a screamer for me. So that would be my favorite bet there in college.
I love it. I'm with you on that too. I also like the over in this game. I think the Auburn Tigers, as you said, they go 10 deep, and that's more important, I think, in the tournament defensively with that kind of rotation, because everybody is not going to be dead tired coming into the second half of those critical games in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, if they make it that far. But Auburn, South Carolina is only 22-50 against the spread in road games when they allow 75 or more points Simply put, my predictive model says there's an 82% probability that Auburn will score at least 75 tonight, and that puts them in the catbird seat to cover and possibly win this game. I wouldn't be surprised, Matt, if they win by 20. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I just kind of see a beat down here.
Yeah, I think Auburn is certainly be safe. I think Auburn is a safe bet. If you're a betting person, but I'm not. But if there was a fantasy bet, not that that's even a thing, but if there was a fantasy bet, I would still pick Auburn. There's no question. I mean, they've been playing lights out up to this point throughout the whole entire season. Coach has got them just balling out every single chance they get, touch that ball, and they just see nothing but iron in front of them. They've just been hitting everything from all around the court. So again, a fantasy bet, it would have to be Auburn, no doubt about it.
Oh, I love it. While you're at it, Rudy, we'll conclude the show here. I want everybody to know where they can find you and your great work, iHeart Radio and the Rude Dog Show, which is one of the best ones around too.
Well, I appreciate that, John. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Always have a show. I always have a show on the rudedogshow.com. Throw me a follow at Rude Dog Reyes on Twitter. I love talking sports online. Feel free to drop me a note or throw me a follow. You can go and subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Rude Dog Show, of course, on YouTube. And I love TikTok. TikTok's been kind of a way to get yourself out there. And if you're not out there, TikTok's the way to do it. You can find me there at The Rude Dog Show. So thanks, everybody. And, of course, I'll be the triple threat on iHeart Radio today, handling KEIB, Seattle 1090, The Patriot, and California Regional News. So I have my work cut out for me. And I'm sure you guys have your work cut out for you, too.
Oh, in different ways, I guess, right, Matt? Where can people find your information? Where's the best place to find you, Matt, on the vast amount of social media platforms that we all are on?
Yeah, on now X at Depress Picks, and then same thing on Instagram and TikTok as well, and then doing my daily rating and podcasting for Oddschecker US. So you can find all my articles at oddscheckerus.com, as well as my my morning show that I do with them on their Twitter, Oddschecker US. But yeah, appreciate you having me on, John, and great to connect with you, Rudy. You guys are both doing great work. So yeah, excited to see what we got moving forward.
No doubt.
Sounds great. And I'll tell you, Rudy, Matt must be doing something right. Last I checked, he was there 160,000 followers on the X, I think.
Gosh, I feel on the small edge with only 10.3K. My goodness.
Well, you're low man on the show.
I guess so. Yeah, low man on the X poll, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, you and I combined are about 25% of his 160,000 or whatever it is. But congratulations for that, Matt. It's a really, really great accomplishment.
Yeah, it means a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good work there.
So we can find me at predictiveplaybook.com and also on the X at John Ryan Sports 1. And in about 10 minutes, I have another show with Steve Merrill of Wager Talk, and he's another great bettor. But you know what else he's good at? We love talking trading the markets. So we will be talking about some of the frothiness of this bull trend and if it's going to keep going. We had a big dip yesterday. Is it real? Is it going to be a new trend in bearish market territory? And some individual stocks. We look at the sports stocks, DraftKings, EDR, which is the UFC, which I absolutely just love that sport. When I first watched that sport, I thought, oh my God, this is archaic. I cannot watch this. It's too violent. And I wasn't being a weak man. I just didn't appreciate it. But you know what? They're the most incredible athletes on the planet. This hand speed is ridiculous.
Yeah, the stuff they do is crazy.
It is. It's so much fun to watch. But anyway, thanks a lot, guys, for being on the show. We'll be back again next Wednesday, more than likely at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until then, remember the two most important things: bet with your head, not over it, and may all the wins be yours. Thanks for watching.